Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. I've had many different questions over the last few months on how to plane and true lumber. So today I'm going to put it all together in one quick video for you. And here's the board that I want to run through my jointer, but it's too wide, so I need to trim it down a little bit. But you can see that it's bowed, so it's dangerous to run through your table saw, but there's some other things that you could do with it. You could run it multiple times through your jointer, and you can see the cupping here. So you'd start off by taking a little bit off the front and a little bit off the back, and it's going to take multiple passes through your jointer. One thing I could do is put a straight edge on it, draw a line down it, and take it over to my bandsaw and cut it off that way. Not very long ago, I showed you how to make this circular saw jig, and the way the jig works is the saw rides against this area with the red line on it and makes a perfect cut. This is another way you could true up one edge by aligning that with your jig and just put it along what looks good, fasten it down, clamp it down, and you could use your circular saw and make a perfect straight line cut on that. And the last method that I'm going to show you today is using this sled, this jig that I made on my table saw, and I'll put a link to this at the end. And basically all I need to do is to tighten down these stops here so that my board can't go beyond that. I can put my board on there because I've already set it up ahead of time. Now I just take a moment and lock it down, and that board is ready to get run through. Now I have a nice straight edge, but that board is still a little bit too wide for my jointer, so I'm going to need to trim it down, and that will also make it parallel. Now, if you look at this board, you'll notice that it's cupped, and you always want to run the cupped side down, and here's why. If you run the cupped side up, you all of a sudden are unstable, whereas with the cupping down, the board doesn't have that wiggle. So let's go over to the jointer and run that through. Now I still have two chores here to do at the jointer, and the first thing is I want to mark the face of this with a mark that I know that that has been done on the jointer. The next thing I want to do, now that I have a nice flat face, now I want to joint either one of these edges, because now I can hold that flat edge against the fence here of the jointer and make sure that I get a good flat edge. Now I have one true surface and I have one true edge, and they're both marked. So from here I can continue on with the rest of the board. But there's one thing that I need to check first, and that's the moisture content. And I know some of you will be asking, why is it important to know the moisture content? This one's good, it's only 5.6%. If your wood is damper, if it's 12 or 14%, for example, if it's a little damp, and now you've trimmed off some of this excess wood on the top and you've exposed new wood underneath, what can happen, and does happen very often, is that wood, as it dries, it will continue to bend or warp or cup. It can move in areas that we don't even know about until we have a look at it. That's why it's best to leave it after you've trimmed one surface and one edge. Let it sit overnight. Check it, and very often you can do that just by putting it on your table saw to make sure that it's true and flat. And if it is, then you can proceed to the planing. And here's an example that I planed one surface and one edge, and as it dried, because it was a little bit damp when I jointed it, and you can see that it's moving. But let me show you how we can fix that. Now for the wood that we're working on that remains nice and flat and even, we can just take that to our planer and just run it through because it's already nice and flat and straight, and we'll assume that it's going to do that. But when you do have a piece of wood like this piece of spalted maple that I have that did warp, the way to fix that is you can make a planing jig. And all a planing jig is, in this case, is just a piece of MDF that's absolutely flat. And I've glued to the end a stopper board on here. No nails or screws in case it were to hit one of the knives of the planer. We don't want it to be hitting any metal. But basically what you do is put it to the end of the jig, and then you use any kind of a shim, and the best thing to do, you can either use hot melt glue or double-sided tape, just so that that board does not move on there, and we would need another one right down there. And when that board now we could run that board through the planer, and it would just take off a skim each time until that board is absolutely flat. And then we can take away the planing jig, flip it over, and get a nice flat board, a nice thickness plane board from that. Now the final two steps for this board that we're working on, of course I need to surface plane it or thickness plane it now, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let it sit for a couple of days to make sure that it doesn't move. So I need to do that. The other thing that I need to do is run that again through my table saw, because I only have one edge here that's gone through the jointer. The other edge is pretty good, but I don't know if it's perfect, so it's going to need to go back through the table saw one more time just to trim it to make sure that I get a good even board. And that's how we true lumber.